Joel Shinofield, the Executive Director of the College Swim Coaches Association, to talk about the recent edicts that the NCAA has tried to put together in terms of recruitment. Joel?
Thank you. I have probably the only person with a harder name to pronounce, so Tom, so I feel pretty good that he got my name right. I thought I'd start just with a little bit of background about the College Swimming Coaches Association of America. We do many things that are similar to what you do. In fact, I was a member of NCAA when I was coaching against Art, not very effectively. He was kicking my tail and everybody else's in the state when I was coaching in Minnesota, coaching high school. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of insight into what we do from an advocacy side of things and also an educational side of things. We're the oldest college coaches organization in the country. We're the first sports group in collegiate athletics to come together as a coaches organization, and we started by running a winter training site down in Fort Lauderdale, the Forum, and that continues to this day. And many people say that actually led to spring break, but we will make sure that nobody thinks that the swimmers are responsible for those riots in the early 50s and 60s. So the things that we really do, our core areas are education. We have an annual convention. We have a partnership with ASCA where we do a college track at ASCA, and we also have a coaching course which doesn't teach anything about physiology, doesn't teach anything about race strategy. It simply teaches how to be the CEO of your program when you become a college coach, to make sure that you're doing all the things that you need to do to keep your program there, to be a good steward of the program so we don't have more programs that are cut. Advocacy, we work with the NCAA, USA Swimming, ASCA, people who develop products for swimming to find ways to make the sport better. Sometimes we're at odds with those people, but we maintain a very good relationship and work in partnership with them as best we can. The recognition that we do, like you, we provide All-America awards to our members and their athletes, Scholar All-American program, both for teams and also individuals. Service awards for a number of years that people have been involved in. We also have awards that we provide at our championship, Coach of the Year, Athlete of the Year, Diver of the Year, Diving Coach of the Year, that we provide for not only all three NCAA divisions, but also for the NAIA and the National Junior College Coaches Association as well. We have winter training programs, as I mentioned before, the Forum in Fort Lauderdale. We have other sites in Florida. We're about to announce a new one in Martin County. So if you're looking for winter training sites for your teams, we can set you up with hotel and a pool time and weight room time, and you don't have to worry about anything other than showing up and coaching your kids on deck. So we do make that available to high school programs as well, if any of you are interested. Greg Lockhart in the CSCAA works on those things, but we have some great training sites all throughout Florida, Puerto Rico, and Arizona. Then we provide resources to new coaches, contact them, and make sure that they have the things that they need to be successful. Like I said, our coaching course is part of that. We contact athletic directors. I'm going down to an unnamed school that's thinking about adding Division I swimming and doing a presentation for them about why they should add swimming versus another sport and what swimming can do for them. So those are things that we do too, try to grow the sport as well. So that's sort of just a basic background of what we do. We have a current initiative with NCAA. There are several new edicts coming down or changes in policy from the NCAA in regards to recruiting. And that just doesn't affect us. That affects you and your athletes. And it can dramatically affect them. One of the proposals, our current bylaw states that college coaches may not contact a high school athlete until after July 1st following their junior year. Which means that the primary recruiting process takes place between that period and when they sign in the fall, or if they wait until the spring. So it's currently about a 5 to 9 month process, which is a big chunk, but it's a manageable amount of time. The NCAA proposed that we move that time frame ahead a full year to July 1st following, they actually proposed initially June 15th following a student's sophomore year. That would then open up the recruiting process, not double it, but in some cases triple the amount of time. At Division II, they proposed, in addition to that, not only will we do that, we're going to allow them to take official visits, overnights on college campuses. And I stepped back and thought, you know, all this does is interfere with their high school experience. All this does is take their last 2 years of high school and focus it on college instead of focusing on where they are right now, being high school students, kids, and athletes. That didn't seem good. It also doesn't seem like a very good idea to have 16-year-olds on college campuses for overnight recruiting visits without their parents around, either from my standpoint as a college coach or as a former college coach, where I have to monitor that from a family standpoint or from just a developmental standpoint. If you think about the athletes you have on your program, sometimes as a college coach, you barely want the college athletes you have on your team overnight anywhere. There's nothing dumber on the planet than an 18-year-old boy, other than possibly a 16-year-old boy or a 16-year-old girl. And so the developmental stage that they're at that point is just not a great thing to have, mixing with 22-year-old college students. And so we really felt that it was important, when the NCAA came up with this, to not only work against it from our own perspective, thinking this is not where we want to go and does not fit within our values, but it was also important to us to include USA Swimming, NISCA, and ASCA to let the NCAA know that this doesn't just affect college coaches and the amount of time they're going to spend recruiting. This has a direct impact on families and younger athletes who are just trying to enjoy their junior year in high school. And for those of you who've had athletes who've been highly recruited or even lightly recruited, they're gone in the fall. If your high school season is during the fall, there are going to be a number of days when those athletes are gone. And if we extend it to 2 years, no longer they'll only be allowed 5 visits. They'd probably be allowed 10 visits. And how does that impact the season? How does that impact the development of the athlete? How does that impact their relationship with their teammates? Some of my greatest memories are being a high school swimmer. And the relationships I have with those guys continue to this day. Those are still some of my best friends. And I can't imagine having been gone from 10 Saturday practices during that time. I think I probably missed 1 high school practice in my life. Unfortunately, it was between sectionals, the day between 2 sectional meets, because I was sick, and then I really bombed at sectionals. But hey, we can always get better. But I'll never forget those guys, and being apart from them that long just doesn't seem like a very fair thing to those kids. So trying to use a partnership to influence the NCAA to say it's not just the college coaches that don't want this. This doesn't make sense for what we do in our sport. It doesn't really make sense for families. So several of the proposals have been suspended due to our work and work with other coaches' organizations. Some of them are in what's called the override process. The NCAA proposes something, it gets passed at convention, and then people say, whoa, wait a minute, we didn't realize this is what that meant. And so the schools then have an override period process where the colleges can then say, you know what, this is not good. And they can, if there are over 75 schools that say, hey, wait a minute, let's slow down and rethink this, it goes in the override process and the policy does not become part of the manual until it's vetted by the entire membership again after a period of time when people can comment. And we're in that process right now for several of the bylaws that affect recruiting. And I'll talk about a few of those right now. Greg, if you want to go to the next. This is what I get every day. I'll see my emails from the NCAA tell me about 11-2, 13-5, and whatnot. And to me, those are like, either pole vaulting numbers for high school. About at this point, it's like pole vaulting high school numbers for girls. But I was a pretty good pole vaulter, I thought. That's all taller than me that I went. But these rules do different things. 11-2 was opposed by the Big Ten. And 11-2 allowed people to produce any kind of recruiting material they wanted and send it to you. So essentially what could happen is one of your athletes could get a fat head, a 6'2" version of themselves with their picture on it in a University of Florida Speedo to put on their wall. That could be a recruiting material based on that rule. And so the Big Ten quickly said, you know what? This is going to cost a lot of money. And if we get into a battle that involves money, there are going to be some big winners and some big losers in this process. And this is what we really want. We got away from sending out, help me out, Greg, media guides because it was too costly. And because it was a waste of paper because people throw them away and you can just download them. And now we're going to send out a fat head of a kid, or we're going to send out, the whole brochure built around this kid's face, as if we need to build up the high school boys' ego anymore before they get to college. That's what we need. We need boys walking into college think they're even better than they are think they are. Hey, coach, my goal this year is to win the 50. You've been 22-2 and the winning time is going to be 18-6. Like, what, and you don't come to practice. Yeah, but I got it, coach. So what we need to build these boys up some more before they get there by sending them a fat head that's the same size as their entire body. So we try to avoid that. So that one will probably be suspended. That override reached over 120 schools, and that pretty much says, hey, this is not where we want to go. 13.5a allowed basically anybody on your staff to become a recruiter, where in the past the head coach and the assistant coach, anybody with that designation could be a recruiter, and there are limits within the NCAA bylaws with how many coaches you can have. Those people could recruit. This would then open that up to really anybody on your staff. And once again, this comes down to an issue where some people have graduate assistants. If you have a combined program, men and women together under one head coach, you can have graduate assistants. If you have separate programs, a head coach for men and a head coach for women, you can't have graduate assistants based on NCAA bylaws. So what that would do is a combined program would now have essentially an unlimited number of recruiters, and a combined or a separate program would have the head coach, the assistant coach, the diving coach, which they share, and they have one volunteer assistant who has to only recruit from campus. They can't go off campus. They can't even make a phone call off campus. They have to make the calls from the office. So those are both suspended, and they had high numbers of override. I don't think they'll come into effect. 13.2 is the bylaw I mentioned earlier, where you could recruit juniors, and that is going to be considered at the May meeting. It's been tabled, but I think there's enough opposition to it that it won't pass. We've been working very closely with the Football Coaches Association, who are against it. And if football's against something, jump on board, because they have the money. And they have the resources, so if they don't think they can do it, swimming coaches are going to have a really hard time, because our budgets are very different than theirs. They spend more. When I was at Minnesota as the volunteer assistant coach at Minnesota, the football team's budget for a home meal before a home football game, to feed those guys and keep them in a hotel at a home game, keep them in a hotel meal, $300,000. That was more than our entire operating budget, right, Craig? So if they don't think they can do it, we certainly can't do it. Of course, we wouldn't have a budget without them either, so it's good, it's important. 13.3, this is one that we're currently fighting, and this is one that, to me, is, am I moving too much? Oh, no, it's something on the phone. Okay, I got it. I thought Mike Stott was telling me to slow down. See if he can keep me going. 13.3, this is sort of an alarming proposal to me, because I think that there's a really big benefit to the recruiting process in teaching kids about how to present themselves and how to act professionally and how to interact with an adult that they don't truly know and communicate well. It's a great opportunity to learn about the world and the whole process of going through a job interview or making a tough decision. What 13.3 does is it allows unlimited communication between recruits and coaches. Currently, we're limited to one phone call per week. We can't text message a recruit. We can send them a message on Facebook, but it has to be a private message. And we can email them an unlimited amount of times. This would say you can call them as much as you want, you can text them as much as you want, you can send them Facebook messages as much as you want. Really, any kind of communication that you want to engage in, you can tweet with them, you can do whatever you want. To me, what that says is this is a casual relationship. This is a matter of convenience. This is, I'm your friend, okay? Once again, it goes back to boy. Do you want boys showing up thinking that they're your friend, or that this is a coach who they respect and they're going to work with? It changes the dynamic. But it also does this. You can't turn off a text message. And if you're a kid who receives a text from a coach and you're worried about where you're going to end up, you're going to always respond to it. I don't care if you're at practice, if you're on your team bus going someplace, if you're in class, if you're at dinner with your family, because you are worried about where you're going to end up. A lot of these kids are. On the converse side, we've got coaches here coaching in a national championship. If they have 50 recruits and they have a good swim in the morning and those 50 recruits all text them in the morning, they have to respond to all of those texts. Because if you don't respond to the kid, it goes back to the ego, they're done. They're not going to be involved with you. So it just creates just this unnecessary situation where we're dependent on a very casual communication tool that doesn't teach people how to interact well. And we all know that kids make big-time mistakes with tweeting and texting. It's just not a way to learn. We don't want people. I was talking to Terry McKeever the other day. She gets emails that say, "Hey, Terry," from potential recruits. That's not a good start. The one thing that you can do, that is going to help your athletes is to tell them when they're in the recruiting process that this is something that takes seriously. This is our United States Olympic coach. It might be a good idea to say, dear Coach McKeever, or Coach McKeever, or something. Even dear Terry is better than hey Terry. So we're all in this process together of educating these kids about growing, about becoming people who are prepared to go out into the world and do things. One of the things that we talk about swimming, whether we're a high school coach or a club coach or a college coach, is the values that swimming teaches. And so when we approach these bylaws, we're trying to stay within those values. And one of the things that I think is very important, and I think many of our members do, and I'm certain many of you do, is that we teach them how to function as people and to function in a way that they're going to be successful. And I just don't think that tweeting with an adult, as somebody in their 40s, I just don't need to be tweeting with a 17, or, and texting with a 17-year-old. We have enough problems in our sport without going down that path. So those are the things that we are basically concerned with right now on the NCAA legislation side. Does anybody have any questions about the recruiting side of things, the regulations, what college coaches are looking for? I'm going to have a good friend of mine, Greg Earhart. Greg coached at Minnesota and then went on to coach at Indiana and now is coaching at Carthage College, but he also runs a recruiting service. And because he runs a recruiting database service for colleges that athletes sign up for free to get the attention of those schools, he's very aware of everything that's going on. He's going to show you some neat tools that you can use with your athletes in the recruiting process, and then also that we think you can use to help high school swimming get some more publicity. But are there any questions about the NCAA recruiting process or tips for recruiting that you'd like to pass on to your athletes? Yes?
A number of months ago, I live in the Denver area, and the Denver Post was doing a big article on a very strong athlete, tennis player. And I even forget if it was a boy or girl. This tennis player was a freshman, and great, but had been offered a college scholarship by a major Pac-12 as a freshman.
Probably as an 8th grader. Yeah, and then now they're becoming a freshman, yeah.
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 That sort of offended me because I thought we had this July 1 between junior and senior year rule, but I was offended enough. I actually called the NCAA, and they said, oh, no big deal. So long as the coach isn't calling them, they can offer them a scholarship. It seems I could not connect A and B.
Yeah. And the scenario that you're discussing is that probably an 8th grader, before they're a recruitable athlete, goes on campus and visits with the coach. The coach says, hey, we got a spot for you here, at whatever school. And the kid says they commit verbally. A kid can verbally commit to anybody. They can go online and say, I verbally commit to Tennessee or wherever. It doesn't mean the coach has had any contact with them. A number of these articles that do come out about this, there was one about gymnastics in North Carolina that was very similar. They said they've been offered a scholarship. It hadn't happened. The parents heard one thing.
Yeah.
But we've even seen high school juniors who commit on our website.
Yeah.
Go up by about 400%.
Yeah, the kids think it's to their advantage to commit early. When you talk to the Coaches Association directors and you talk to the coaches, we just don't want it. Because we have no idea what the development of that athlete's going to be. Take a 5,100 flyer in high school. Well, as a junior, you hope he's going to go 49 as a senior. But if he stays at 51, he's looking at very different schools than if he develops into that 49. So if we, and this is why we don't want to move to junior recruitment, especially in swimming where we have limited resources for recruiting, makes our funnel very big because we're looking at a lot of potential and we don't know where that potential is going to end up. We just can't afford that. Because A, the kid will end up in the wrong place. They'll transfer because they're not going to be able to swim there. This happens a lot in other sports. For instance, lacrosse goalies. You see lacrosse kids committing earlier, and as lacrosse spreads across the country, there are more and more lacrosse programs. Kids in lacrosse are committing very early to Division I schools. So sometimes you end up with 3 or 4 goalies, and it's like a quarterback situation. Only one can play. So we're seeing a lot of transfers. And so almost universally among the coaches associations, we're trying to dissuade early commitments. We'd like to go the other way. We know that that's what's happening, that we're moving to early commitments. We want to get away from it. We don't believe it's good for college athletics. We don't believe it's good for high school athletics. We don't believe it's good for clubs. Because especially in certain sports where kids become very, very specific, not even in a sport, but in a position to try to garner that scholarship or that spot, when they get to college, then they're not going to be successful because they don't have the tools to actually compete. If you look at in the sports that have showcases, where they just show off certain skills, and the kids don't have the full ability to compete when they get on the college campus. So it's definitely a problem. A lot of it is a miscommunication issue, but there is no rule that prohibits a coach from offering a scholarship to an 8th grader. Because they're not a recruitable, at that point they're not a recruit, because they haven't entered high school yet. It's a strange loophole. I mean, it happens all the time in football. You hear about football kids, 8th grade football kids committing to colleges all the time. But the thing about it is, if the college coach offers that scholarship, they don't have to offer it because they can't actually offer a scholarship without offering it in writing within a certain window of the senior year. Any other questions? Yeah, and that's rampant, that people decide they're going to go someplace and then, of course, they change their mind because high school kids never change their mind.
Could you give us a little more color on how the funnel works? In other words, take a D1 coach, how many kids he's starting with, and how that funnel narrows to selecting 6 or 8?
Yeah, it's going to vary quite a bit across the breadth of Division I. We have Division I schools that are fully funded, that are almost an annual contender for a championship. And their list is going to be quite a bit smaller because they have the ability. There are some easy recruiting phone calls to make. Hi, this is Joel Shinofield. I'm the head coach at Stanford. That's a pretty easy recruiting phone call to make, so you don't have to make very many of them. But if you're at another school, that funnel might be, beginning in July, might be 150 student athletes that you're contacting to try to get down to a recruiting class of 6 to 12. So it's going to vary quite a bit. But I think that probably the average for a single gender program is they're going to start with a list somewhere in the 50s with a prioritized list, and then they're going to probably get down to 6 to 12 athletes that they're going to bring in.
And what percent of those are going to go with the early recruiting?
More and more. Greg, you can probably answer this, but I'd say on the scholarship side of things, it's probably 75%. So, and once again, and Greg, maybe you want to comment on this, but the scholarship numbers out there, for most athletes, you're not getting a full ride in swimming. You're getting a partial. There are some of the best swimmers. There are Olympians that competed here last week and compete this week that are not on full scholarships. A lot of kids will say, hey, I'd rather win a team championship and pay a little bit to go to school, and they give some of their scholarship back. So they may have started on a full, and they may graduate on 80% or 60%, depending on what kind of means their family has, if it means that they can win a championship. So there are very good athletes out there that are on less money than you would think. There are only 9.9 scholarships in Division I for men. There are 14 for women on a team. They can be divided any way the coach would like to do that. In Division II, there are 8 per side. Division III, there are none. And then in the NAIA, there are 8 per side. So, any additional questions? What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Greg. Greg's going to show you a few things about the recruiting process and what he can do what you can do to help your athlete find the right school. It's a great process. The very high percentage of our college coaches do subscribe to the recruiting service, so they see your athletes in there, and they do use it to populate their databases. One thing that coaches have to do is we have to follow our compliance offices, and we have to turn in logs. Their recruiting software does that automatically. His database goes right into their recruiting software so they can see it, but also he's got some neat things with top times you can do for your state. So you can compare top times all season long, and then also compare it against other states, which I think is pretty neat. So this is Greg Earhart. He's the head coach at Carthage College in Wisconsin, and turn it over to Greg.
I think we're good. I just want to thank Joel, thank Niska for the opportunity to talk to you for a couple minutes, and I don't want to take much more than a couple minutes. My introduction to Niska actually was 25 years ago at this convention when my high school coach, some of you may remember Larry Hill from Ralston, Nebraska, and Rich Hood from Omaha Burke took the junior classes of both our teams out here to watch NCAAs, and I'll never forget I found a deck pass on the ground right at the end of the meet, and I ran down on deck, and I went up and I shook Eddie Reese's hand and acted like I knew what I was doing. And meanwhile, my coach was up in the stands going, come on, we got to go, because we were driving all the way back to Nebraska that night. But that was my introduction to swimming and kind of got me hooked. And I was I can say it now, I was a horrible swimmer. I was a 106 100 breaststroker, and that was yards, not meters. And I came to the sport late, and I wanted to be able to continue on my career, and part of that involved wanting to swim in college. And back then, there was not the internet. There were not the resources available. We had my high school coach, Coach Hill, who knew a couple coaches here and there, but that was kind of the extent of it. And especially for somebody like me with no talent, I just wanted to create an opportunity. And so, weird series of events. I wound up swimming at a little bitty college, which no longer has swimming. And that experience led me into wanting to go into coaching. Going into coaching, it's funny that Joel and I are friends because he's the executive director of the College Swim Coaches Association. And I sat in their meeting one year, and I was like, I could do a better job in my free time. And that was kind of how CollegeSwimming.com was born. And since CollegeSwimming.com was founded, I've never had a problem with spare time or long relationships. So it's kind of worked out pretty well for me. But the thing that we've tried to do with CollegeSwimming.com is equip teams with resources to help themselves publicize themselves, help themselves find recruiting opportunities. And as we've grown, we've got lots and lots of people that have kind of come to us saying, can you help us out with this? And as Joel mentioned, there have been a lot of changes in the recruiting landscape in terms of the legislative side of things. And one of the things that we've kind of taken on the banner of is trying to provide some of the educational opportunities and resources for coaches and kids. And so I don't know if you can see this, it's not real big, but what we do is we create profiles, or we allow kids to create profiles on our website. And when they do, they get access to recruiting advice that's specific to where they're at, whether they're a freshman, sophomore, junior. You'd ask about scholarships. One of the articles in here is how common is a full ride, and it's an article that's basically built on the feedback of about 30 different college coaches. And we're trying to create resources to make it easier for coaches to find kids and make it easier for kids to find a school where they can swim at. And if I was able to swim in college, anybody can swim in college. But just as there's a lot more opportunity or a lot more changes that have happened in the recruiting process, and we want to educate kids about that, there's also really more swimming opportunities in college than there were a decade ago. We always lament, and it's easy to recognize the teams that have eliminated swimming. UCLA, Syracuse, Illinois, things like that. But in the last year, we've actually seen a net increase in teams, but they're not as easy to find. They're not the schools that are recognizable that you might think. 2 years ago, Oklahoma Baptist didn't have a swim team. A year later, they had a team of 70 kids, and 6 months after that, they won their first NAIA national championship. So some schools look at swimming as a growth opportunity to increase their enrollment, increase their caliber of student that they come in, but those are not necessarily the schools that are easy to find. So what we've done is we've created a set of search tools for kids that can come in, and they can plug in their times. Most likely, if we've got meet results from a high school state results, we've got their name and a little bit of information on them, and they can log in and claim their profile. So we created one, for instance, right here. And this profile is set up for somebody that would be living in Rockton, Illinois. And let's say this guy wants to go to school within 100 miles of Rockton, Illinois. Well, there's 18 schools that it's narrowed down to that he can choose from. And honestly, distance from home is the number one determinant of somebody's college choice. So if they want to say go to a private school, well, that narrows it down to 12 schools. If they want a small school, or let's say medium-sized school, 12 to 15,000 students, that brings them down to just 7 schools that meet their criteria. And we create these resources in a profile so that somebody can see, all right, here's what's out there. Oh, I didn't know about that school. Oh, I knew about that one, but I didn't know the admission rate was quite that tough, or that one doesn't have my major. And then what we've done is enabled it, excuse me, so that kids can actually click on a link and see how their times would fit on a given team. So the name in dark is actually my web developer who used to swim for me, breaststroker. He's a 102 breaststroker. He would have been 7th on our depth chart at the team where I was at. If he goes to University of Chicago and 100 breast is his event, well, also 7th on their depth chart. But we want to create a set of tools so that kids are really sophisticated in terms of how they approach college coaches, even when they're sending an email that says, hey, Terry, or something like that. They know how to find and research information. We want to provide them with the information to make good choices. We want to be able to equip you as coaches to help guide them the way Coach Hill did for me 25 years ago when I started looking at schools. And the other thing is, my other purpose for being here is just to kind of get a sense, what can we do for you as coaches? Is there information resources that we can provide? One thing that we have done for a couple college conferences is we create top times lists for their website. We can create a national high school top times list for you or for different states that's selectable by whatever, and we want to be able to support that. The whole premise behind CollegeSwimming.com has always been to support the sport that's given me so much and turn it back. I still have to coach full time to pay my mortgage every month. It's not coming out of CollegeSwimming.com. This is just an example of one conference that uses us as a top times list. So if there are ways that we as an organization, and Joel would say the same thing from the CSCAA standpoint, if there are ways that we as an organization can help you as coaches or you as coaches associations, especially because it is such a much more diverse environment than the college side of things, by all means, we'd love to help you in any way we can. So again, I appreciate the opportunity that Niska and Joel provided me. But with Joel, we went 6 minutes over when we said we were going to go. He said we were going to go for 32 minutes. But if there's anything we can do, please let us know.
So does the athlete fill out a profile?
The athlete fills out a profile, and I think I have a...
They don't have to fill out a profile. Greg's got a sophisticated program that pulls in meet results, and so those athletes start to populate. If they do come in and fill out the profile, then it gives a more full profile with all their information. If they want to be recruited, they can fill out the profile. So when you see his list of people that are on there, you'll see that all the top athletes are in there, like Katie Lenecki's in there, people like that. But in addition, there are numerous athletes who haven't filled out the profile that are there because the meet results are there, which is how he populates the top times list. So for instance, we did the top times list for the NCAA this year. And I called Greg, he sent me the code, put it on our website, and now the NCAA has an active and always updated top times list. It just requires the schools that host the meets to send in those results, and they get directed into the right database. The same thing would happen with the state high school situation, where you would just take the state would send their results in, and then they would create a top times list that was easily searchable and could be updated constantly. And it could just be on your high school league website or on an independent school website.
In answer to your question, some of the stuff is behind a registration wall, some of it isn't. But if somebody wants to come and search for a set of schools, they can do that. The search by radius, in order to do that, you have to provide us your address. So with your address, we can tell you what schools are within there. And the reason behind that, to be transparent about it, is we provide this information to college coaches. They're looking for kids that want to swim in college. This allows them to get a peek at what their test scores are, what their times are. Most of the coaches know what their times are, but they want to know a little bit more about the kids as they start to build their list. Joel talked about the funnel. You'd rather start out with a list of 50 kids that are going to fit your school's profile than 150, hoping that you're going to get 50 that fit that profile. So it's always, have never and nor will we ever charge kids or high school coaches to be able to do this. This is something that comes from my experience in swimming and wanting to be able to continue it on and fight for all the other 106.8 breaststrokers out there that try to find an opportunity to swim.
What does your organization charge staff to get kids here?
Nothing. Nothing. We were at Olympic trials last year, and a dad was playing around with our service, and he goes, "This is amazing." And he goes, "I just paid $25 to somebody to do this kind of same thing." And I was like, "Oh, $25 doesn't seem like." And he looks at me with this dead serious eye, and he was just like, $2,500. I was like, "Dude, you've been better off spending your money on an ACT prep class to open up more schools for your son."
Yeah. My only point is that somehow you have let coaches in some parts of the country know, like we have 2 organizations, I'm in northeastern Pennsylvania, and they charge a kid minimum $300 to do this.
Yeah, we're good.
My kids would say, "I don't want to be bothered."
Yeah, we're good at managing times and connecting kids with coaches. We're not very good at marketing ourselves. we aren't. That's why I'm really appreciative of being in front of coaches. You know, from our standpoint, we would rather, and because of how I work, I mean, I'm a coach myself, I'd like to have coaches that can help see how this is going to help their kids rather than try to sell a kid on something. That's what I'm not good at. I want to find the right kids for our program. Yep. Not with me. I found out this morning that I was speaking this afternoon, so I can certainly provide it. My name is Greg Earhart, and so if you email me, and I'll stay around as long as people want, it's gearhart@collegeswimming.com. Sure. Oh, yeah. Especially if you have boys with good test scores that are interested in a private college in Wisconsin. Yes, it's Gear, GEARHART, at CollegeSwimming.com. And yeah, that's a catch-all for everything, including parents. I mean, we talk about kids that are a little unprofessional. You should see the emails from parents that I get when their kids are not ranked high enough in the recruit rankings. I have a whole separate file just for those.
Can you show what a kid's profile looks like real quick?
Sure. I'll admit the kids' profiles are not really pretty, but we are working on that for, that's a project for this coming summer. I actually wanted to point out this. You can build a list of favorite schools. This is one that we built up. Allows you to compare how selective each school is, how your times fit in, what the cost is, what division they're at. We've purposely set it up so that it's division neutral because I don't think kids always realize how competitive some schools can be. I always like to talk about a competitiveness continuum. You know, you have your top 10 schools that are here at the NCAA Division I meet on this end, and then you have little Buena Vista College where I swam at on this end. And your Division I schools kind of populate here, and your Division II schools are like this, and your Division III schools are here. I mean, there's the anchor on the 400 medley relay this morning for Michigan. Swam at a Division III school last year. Finished up his eligibility, had one more year, or it finished up his school at Kenyon, had one more year, transfers to Michigan. But this gives you a sense of what each swimmer's profile is like. If they log in, or if they create an account, this is Yvonne Monoloff, for instance, it'll ask you for your name, it'll type in Yvonne Monoloff, and then what you'll see, if you're somebody that we already have meet results on, it'll say, hey, we've already got an Yvonne Monoloff in our database, is this you? If it is, yep, then you can dress it up with your photos, you can tell coaches about your accomplishments. Basically, for us, what coaches want to know is your contact information and your academic scores. The times they find, and they see them firsthand, but this, it's a pretty basic profile. And it is something, you know, I can assure you that it is seen by college coaches. We have, I would say, almost a little over half of the top 25 at this meet that are our clients right now. And about 20% of all college teams right now. And this is not exactly a service that spreads word of mouth. You're not going to see Dave Durden picking up the phone, talking to his buddy at Stanford going, hey, you got to try this place out. This is a great way to find new recruits.
And one thing, too, the college coaches can search for what they're looking for based on academics, times, things along those lines. So when they're looking at it, they have a search function as well from there. It helps them find recruits that they think are going to fit with it. And as Greg said, one of the most competitive things about college coaching is recruiting. So this is something something that is a great tool, but not everybody uses it yet because people aren't willing to share it with their buddy. I think last year, Greg had something like, between conference champions and runner-up, they had like 80% of those schools. So the schools that are winning have figured this out, and they figured out that they can't coach what they don't have. So it's a good chance for your athletes to get some exposure, but also for you to help them sort of narrow down their college search.
And I think the other part is the educational piece. I mean, we're creating content. You know, we're not going to out-tweet every other website out there, but we are creating some valuable content that kids and parents can look at and go, that's really nice to know. That's a question I'd be intimidated to ask a college coach, but here it is in a format that asks 50 college coaches the same question.
You're to be applauded for your efforts.
You're to be applauded. You work with high school boys and girls. No, it is. It's because of guys like Coach Hill that inspired me to do what I do, and now I want to share it with others. I saw some people nodding. How many people here remember Coach Hill or Rich Hood?
Coach Hood's here. I
Is
mean,
he? Joel told me I couldn't also say this, but 25 years ago at the NCAA convention, I might have learned what beer was too. Probably not. Probably not. That was somebody else. Yeah.
So should we encourage our freshmen
I
to do the profile so that it's in there for the 4 years?
I would encourage them to do that because I think the earlier any kid starts the process, the easier it is on their family and themselves because they have more options available to them. And not just we don't want somebody to create a profile and just be done with it. We're creating content so that they can come back their sophomore year and say, okay, here's a checklist of things that I need to know my sophomore year. And the earlier they start that process, you're not going to go whole hog on it, but the earlier you start the process, the less stress it is when it comes time, especially if they have a fall season and you're trying to line up trips to different schools and you're trying to coach your fall season at the same time and you don't want to lose your kid for 5 weekends. I have a boy that emailed me a week ago, inquiring about school, and I go, okay, it's good. You're starting early, junior? He goes, no, I'm a senior. I'm like, sorry, I can't get you into school at this point. And boys like to procrastinate. Yeah.
Could you comment on the relative importance of SAT or ACT scores versus grade point average versus high school rank?
Joel's probably more versed in this because he comes from better schools than I do. I think it depends on geographic region. It depends on the competitiveness of the school. I mean, some schools value ACT over SAT. Some of the most elite schools are doing away with SAT because they're considered biased against certain minorities or against women in certain areas versus men. I think what you do want to do is you want to instill in your kids that they want to be very aggressive in terms of the courses and the grades they're taking early on in their academic career. Right now I have a breaststroke recruit who desperately wants to come to Carthage. I mean, just absolutely wants to, has pretty good ACT score, and he's sitting at 1.97 GPA. Has ADD, has been diagnosed, wrote probably one of the most passionate letters to get into school, but he can't get in because 1.97, he needs to get above 2.0. Well, by the time he's a senior in high school, there's not going to be a whole lot of altering of that GPA up and down. And I think if you I had a conversation with Ted Knapp at Stanford about this, and he was like, you need to tell kids that they need to start taking AP courses their sophomore year, because when they send me their transcripts at the end of their sophomore year, if they don't have AP courses on them, what can I do with them? We can't create special classes for them here at Stanford.
I think that's the big issue, is that what admissions officers want to see, what the NCAA regulations are set up for, is that they want to see some balance. They want to make sure that if a kid has good test scores, they're doing well in school. There's not a big discrepancy between those things. And so they need to be connected. And that a kid who has a very high, like say a 32 ACT but has never taken an honors course at their school is not challenging themselves. And that's going to be a red flag. So it's going to be very dependent on what kind of school the student is looking at. But for a selective school, those two things are going to be in the same range. The GPA or rank, and even for schools that they don't rank, the admissions officers can figure out the kids' rank based on the classes they take and the grade and the profile of the school. So those three things all need to be in alignment for a highly selective school. If you're looking at an Ivy, if you're looking at one of the top 20 liberal arts colleges, if you're they're looking at a really good engineering school. During the time that I was at Minnesota, we went from an average ACT that we could get an athlete in at about 25. By the time I left, it was 29. And so many of these major universities have eliminated sort of their kind of assistant programs to get kids in because the flagship university got so difficult to get into. That if they're looking at a major university, a flagship school, they are going to need to have a very, very good academic record, and that did not used to be the case. They're going to have one that's commensurate with getting into one of those top schools. And so the academic profile of the kid is becoming more and more important. We've seen this year a couple of very, very talented all-American, world-class athletes who are not in school this year because of academics. When you have limited scholarship dollars, you're wowed by the time, but if a kid can't compete for you at this time of the year, the scholarship is wasted. So coaches are becoming consumers in that way too, to say, hey, my return on investment for this scholarship is not going to be good because this is a kid who's not serious about school. He's not serious about school in high school. It's certainly a lot easier to screw around in college if your parents aren't around, and there's this thing called fear there, all right? And then the temptations of being on your own, and it's harder to swim, it's harder to go to class because your classes are more difficult, there's more work, and it's easier to do something else instead of it. They're gonna back off. And with the APR requirement, the progress report, academic progress report for schools, you also can't afford it because you lose scholarships if kids are not making progress towards their degree. So there's this whole confluence of events, which means that even at schools 20 years ago, where the coach was just concerned that you were going to try hard academically, now they need to know that you can do it. So there's no longer sort of this safe haven for the kids who have worked hard both in your program, in the pool, but also in school. It's becoming rare and rare.
And I think there's a diversity of schools. I just brought it up. There's an article. We asked coaches, what would you rather have, a 44.900 freestyler with a 2-point GPA or a 47.900 freestyler with a 3.5 GPA? And I think we got 25 different responses from coaches. And certainly you want the 3.5 guy that's going 44.9, but there's a wide range of schools out there. There's a wide range of coaches and resources and opportunities. And again, that's why I think encouraging kids to start early, not to feed their ego about being a college swimmer years from now, but having them have opportunities available to them so that it doesn't get too narrow. The kid that emailed me last week, I said, here's a list of 6 schools that I think you can still probably get into. Here's 2 community colleges that we often send kids to, and you're somebody that I want on my team, but the reality is, and honestly, he's a guy that if he had contacted me in the fall, we could have got him into school. But at this point in time, no. So you always want, and I think that holds true with everything, financial aid process. You want to apply early so you get the best scholarships academically. There's twice as many women's scholarships out there as there are men's, and there's probably 100 times as much academic scholarship out there as there is swimming scholarship. So that's stuff that we want to educate kids about, again, because I think there are places for everybody that can swim in school. But I think we know that our kids, especially on the boys' side, that's what I work with. I'm convinced that every boy that I talk to on July 1st thinks that they're going to Texas, Auburn, or whatever state university from what state they're from. And then November rolls around, they haven't heard from any of those schools, but they keep getting letters from this Carthage coach. And okay, maybe they'll start to look at me now.
But it goes back to legislative piece too. One of the things that if you make a process that you start early, it becomes a goal-driven process within the family, with the people they trust, their coaches, their teachers, without pressure. And so that when they get to that time when the recruiting process starts and fully engages, they have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. So if a coach calls from a school that they're not interested, doesn't fit their profile, they just call because of their time. They say, Coach, thank you very much. I really appreciate your interest, but these are the schools I'm looking at, or this is the area I'm looking at to go to school. And it just allows for an informed decision. And you know what? As a coach, on that first call, you'd rather hear that than a kid you keep recruiting who has no intention of ever being part of your university. And so it allows for you to work with the kid, develop a goal of where they want to go, a clear idea of what they're looking for, so that when the process starts, it's not overwhelming for them. And taking that time to do it is important. important, which is why we really don't want it to occur any earlier. Because we'll make more mistakes. The kids will make more mistakes.
I want to thank Greg and Joel for the presentation.
Hey, thank you.